and welcome to another fascinating episode of Sex in the Watchtower, where we look at the strange and unsettling teachings of the Jehovah's Witnesses about sex. Today, we are going to look at some historical sex, that is, pre-1970. You'll notice that the tone is quite a bit different in some of these older articles, much more officious and condescending and just gross. Also, these older articles are obnoxiously, obscenely long. Now, as if you need reminding, this video is not safe for work. You don't want your kids overhearing it, and I'd be careful about dogs and cats too. Although my cats are exposed and they seem to be fine, but they're fixed after all. Let's get started. Our first nugget for this episode comes from the Watchtower in 1958 in the Questions from Readers section. Why, after receiving from God the express command to multiply and fill the earth, did Adam and Eve refrain from carrying out this procreation mandate while they were perfect in the Garden of Eden? So we don't know how much time passed between Jah telling them to start popping out babies and when they got kicked out of Eden for stealing fruit. I always assumed that there wasn't enough time for all that, like they screwed up almost immediately. I'm not sure why I thought that actually, but I never really thought it through, I guess. I mean, obviously, anyone who can actually believe this shit hasn't thought it through, but anyway, this is a pretty good question. Although, if Eve was pregnant when she ate the fruit, that would certainly explain a lot. Asking this question concerning Adam and Eve is like trying to meddle in the private affairs of a Christian married couple today and asking why they have had no children yet. Shocking. What? This is something that the witnesses actually do on the regular, all the time. They meddle in the private affairs of their followers to an astounding degree. Remember the articles we looked at where they forbade oral and anal sex even among married couples? Jehovah God set no definite time for Adam and Eve to begin having perfect children to fill the earth. So I guess they could have imperfect little brats whenever they wanted them? They being perfect, their intercourse together sexually would be for the purpose of reproducing the human kind. Wait. I have questions. Why did they word it this way? Intercourse. Together, sexually. Could they have intercourse separately? And does this mean to say that perfect people would only have sex to procreate? What, did they not experience orgasm or something? Because that seems like a pretty good reason to have intercourse together, sexually. I'm not sure why anyone would have intercourse separately asexually. Is that even possible? Evidently, there was no intercourse between them for the begetting of children while they were in the Garden of Eden. Oh, but they might have had intercourse for other reasons. But you just said also, it doesn't matter what purpose you have in mind when you decide to get busy. Public service announcement. There are plenty of people who just do the deed for the fun of it and end up accidentally procreating. And there are also plenty of people who go into it with the hope of getting knocked up who are repeatedly unsuccessful. I'm just saying. Evidently, there was no begetting of a child before they were expelled from the Garden of Eden. Otherwise, their first son, born after their expulsion and named Cain, would have been born perfect of his mother Eve, just as Jesus was born perfect from his imperfect mother Mary. It kind of seems like they're saying here that Eve was imperfect anyway because she's a woman? I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. Why? Because Cain would have had the perfect Adam as his father. So they're saying that Adam was still perfect, but Eve wasn't? What the fuck? Why not? How? Jehovah God did not... Really? Excuse me. What are you doing? Jehovah God did not drive Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden just because they did not promptly begin to have children, according to the procreation mandate. Is there anyone anywhere who doesn't know why Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden? And what kind of idiots do they think we are? The sin for which they were expelled from Eden was their partaking of the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Their first act of intercourse that the Bible records was after their expulsion from Eden as sinners. Why they did not have intercourse and produce children during their stay in the Garden of Eden is their own personal affair. Seriously, can you imagine Jehovah's Witnesses accepting that something sexual is someone's own personal business? Or actually respecting personal boundaries in any way? Because I can't. Seriously, this makes me laugh because it's so counter to the way they behave in everyday life. This proved to be very providential. Providential means that something is opportune or occurs with good timing, or it's something that happens with divine intervention. It made it possible for all the offspring of Adam and Eve outside of the Garden of Eden to be redeemed by the one human sacrifice of the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, wait. I'm trying really hard to follow the logic here. So it's either good timing or it's something God planned so that everyone would need the redemptive sacrifice? You mean he planned this all out so that he could send Jesus to earth and torture him to death to supposedly save all the imperfect assholes that descended from Adam and Eve? Wow. What I want to know is why the fuck God would want to do that. And what did Jesus do to piss him off so much? I mean, why? Why was he supposedly engineering things to make sure that all the people supposedly needed to be redeemed? Actually doesn't make any sense anyway, because Jehovah is the one requiring the ransom as well as the one paying the ransom. So how did I ever wrap my brain around this nonsense? Our next article is from the Watchtower in 1964. It's called Telling the Generation to Come.
Oh, my.
Oh, boy. I'm sure that they did not intend this, but this title is hilarious for some reason. Seriously, this had to have been an Easter egg. As you will see, this article is definitely not telling anyone that it's okay to come. Actually, quite the opposite. Teenage boys and girls imagine that they have already reached manhood and womanhood, and they keep trying to prove it. And they just lost any teenage boys or girls who were actually reading this shit. Nothing like a little condescension to make people want to listen to you, jerks. A little worldly knowledge gained at school goes to their heads like a draught of strong wine.
They're getting shit-faced on knowledge.
What steadying influence are you going to bring to bear on this situation? Your preschool training of them... Whoa. We were talking about teens. There's a lot of territory between preschool and teens. Should properly have impressed them with the fact that there is only one source of true knowledge. Which is, of course, Watchtower. I mean, Jehovah, which just means Watchtower. Now, as they eagerly lap up the information presented to them in school, continually remind them that their study courses in history, religion, and science will be dictated and slanted by nationalism, sectarianism, and evolutionism. Cult alert! Cult alert!
Only believe Watchtower approved information.
There's more of the same silly dreck here, so let's just skip ahead, shall we? As the late teen years are reached, one of the most deadly foes to your child's future with which you will have to do battle is the desire for popularity. So you're telling me that wanting to be liked by your peers is deadly? Deadly? That's ridiculous! It's completely normal to want people to like you. The desire for belonging and significance is the literal keystone to human psychological well-being, according to Adlerian psychology. I think it's actually more deadly to be socially isolated and living in terror of demons and doomsday, but what do I know? Moving right along. Whether popularity is sought through sports, dress, sex, social or business success, or in any other field, it takes possession of the mind and crowds out all that is good and spiritually healthful. Have you ever felt possessed by the desire for popularity? Does it completely control your life? No? I didn't think so. The only reason someone would become obsessed with popularity in school or at work is if they don't have any sense of belonging or significance at home. And why wouldn't they have those feelings in their home? Surely it couldn't be because your parents are constantly telling you how imperfect and childish and silly you are, or how you might not make it through Armageddon because you want worldly kids at school to like you. Be on the alert for the early, stealthy advances upon your child from this quarter. Read over and discuss with him frequently the 11th chapter of Hebrews, underlining the points that those men of approved faith were unpopular, they were persecuted, and yet in Jehovah's view, the world was not worthy of them. And this is how many Jehovah's Witness parents raise their children. They're no part of the world, completely separate and superior, and that means that they can't be liked. Some people, like my mom, even took it further, as in you should be persecuted and unpopular and actively bullied because that will mean that Jehovah likes you better than everyone else. He has a strange way of showing it. Being bullied, regardless of the reason, is not fun. But when I came home from school crying as a kid because of vicious bullying, my mom smiled and said, "It is wonderful to be persecuted because it means we have Jehovah's favor." This is frankly stupid and dangerous and completely unnecessary. Sex is a major problem at this stage of your child's life.
Oh, my.
A major problem for whom? I mean, if they're Jehovah's Witness kids, they're not even allowed to do it. So I would say that the lack of sex is a major problem for them. But I'm pretty sure that's not what they meant. Many parents fail through an exaggerated sense of delicacy to inform their children properly on this subject and then wonder why the young folk get mixed up in shameful immoralities. Were they really worried that Jehovah's Witness parents wouldn't want to talk to their kids about penises and vaginas and sexual intercourse? Please. Okay, my dad was not keen to have that conversation with us for sure, but my mom would not shut up about it, like ever. Notice how tastefully, yet adequately, the Bible discusses this matter. Really? Oh my God. Using a private, family-owned cistern as representing a woman with her ability to give sexual refreshment to her husbandly owner.
My.
I'm sorry, what the fuck? Men, your wives are not your property. We are not wells or cisterns or other inanimate objects. Women are people. We are human beings with desires and preferences and personalities and feelings and all those other messy human things. So go the fuck on, you misogynist bastards. The words of Proverbs 5:15-19 are most expressive. Drink water out of your own cistern and tricklings out of the midst of your own well. So how did they actually decide that the cistern is a woman? Is it because sister sounds like cistern? I mean, that's about the intelligence level we're dealing with here. The way this is worded, it could simply mean not to steal water from others, since the Bible was written by people who lived in an arid climate. That would make sense. And why is no emphasis put on the last part there, where you're supposed to rejoice with your wife and your hind and your mountain goat? Doesn't this scripture indicate that each married couple should have a hind and a mountain goat on hand at all times? Not to mention their own private cistern? Quick! Call the elders. I think the whole congregation is in trouble for not following biblical commandments. A mere youth can be taught that the expression, your own cistern, signifies a wife of legal ownership by marriage. You do not own your wife. Decent people don't even want to own other people. Why do we have to keep telling you that? And that anyone partaking of marriage privileges while still unmarried is in fact no better than a common thief.
My.
Who are we stealing from then? Riddle me that, you bunch of jackwagons. Aptly, then, the harlot's words of enticement to the inexperienced young man are expressed at Proverbs 9:17. Stolen waters themselves are sweet, and bread eaten in secrecy, it is pleasant. What does this have to do with anything? Not good, actually. The sex consciousness of youth needs to be balanced also by sobering facts about the lurking diseases related to loose sex associations that are rife in the world today. Yes. Terrify them until the fear and anxiety are worse than the blue balls. Statistics can be produced to show how syphilis and other social scourges are on the increase. Pull no punches in explaining their dread, painful, and often fatal effects. Yes, parents, you should exaggerate whenever you can. Never mind that humanity's been procreating successfully for centuries and that STDs have existed for at least that long. Never mind that medical science is better than ever at treating most of these diseases too. We don't want them knowing that part. Only the scary, grotesque, and horrifying bits. At the same time, give proper supervision to your child's companionships with those of the opposite sex. Do not count too heavily on their self-control and integrity. Because of course, they're completely incapable of being in control of their own bodies or making any decisions for themselves, especially about who they might be attracted to. Heavens! The sex drive is a most powerful force. Use the force, Carson. To grant youth the opportunities for putting it to the test, while yet they have not learned the rights and responsibilities connected with it, is like permitting him to drive a high-powered car on a busy highway without bothering to give him proper instruction on driving and on other people's rights. There is so much here. First of all, the grammar is all over the place. I think what they're trying to say is that letting youths experience any kind of sexuality before firmly indoctrinating them is like letting a thoroughly caffeinated 12-year-old behind the wheel of a Formula One race car. Seriously, Jehovah's Witnesses, another person's sex drive does not belong to you, even if that other person is your child. Parents don't grant their children the right to have sexual feelings. Now, sure, you don't want to throw your kid to the wolves as soon as they hit puberty, and education is important. But it does need to be rooted in reality, for crying out loud. Trying to completely negate a teen's sexuality as the Jehovah's Witnesses do it is nothing short of a recipe for disaster. It matters not that this smart world views sex promiscuity with the utmost tolerance. Actually, this is not true. like at all. It isn't true in 2020, and it wasn't true in 1964 when this article was written. You don't believe me? Ask any girl who's ever been slut-shamed.
We must keep reminding ourselves and our children that it is God's favor and life that we are seeking, not the world's favor and death.
You heard it here, folks. If Jehovah likes you, you'll live. And if anyone else in the whole goddamn world likes you, you're gonna die. On that cheery thought, let's move on to the Watchtower in 1960 in an article called
Upholding the Honorableness of Marriage.
We'll start with a study question, which illustrates how far the Watchtower publications have been dumbed down over the past 50 or 60 years. They used to at least be semi-literate. Not that they made any sense, but still.
In the physical developing of boys and girls, toward what does the normal course of human life work?
What?
In the normal, regular course of things, all human life works toward males getting married to females with a view to being fruitful and producing children in one's image and likeness.
Hang on just a second. That's actually not entirely true. I mean, yes, human biology leans toward procreation because its whole purpose is propagation of the species, after all. That does make sense. What doesn't make sense is this marriage crap. I mean, marriage is a social contract, y'all. It's not part of your biological makeup. If it was, it would occur in the wild. Like, I don't know, wedding rings would just spontaneously appear whenever a couple hooked up and got pregnant. But they don't. If this was part of our biological makeup, it wouldn't be possible to procreate without it. Your junk just wouldn't work unless you were married. You know, kind of like how pregnancy can't occur without a sperm and an egg and some hormonal slime. And another thing, I never once imagined producing children in my image and likeness. Recreating myself was not the focus, and I would seriously question the maturity of a parent for whom that was the most important thing.
When a boy reaches the age of from 13 to 16 years, and the girls the age from 11 to 14 years, the reproductive organs come to maturity. The boy and girl reach what is called the age of puberty or adulthood, and they can perform their respective parts in bringing children into the world.
Puberty and adulthood are not the same thing. You know what's different? I mean, besides the fact that they're not done physically growing yet, their brains. Their fucking brains aren't done developing yet either. I mean, this article is really creeptastic, especially considering the long-standing history that they have had with child sexual abuse within the Jehovah's Witness organization. They think an 11-year-old girl is a woman. Just let that sink in.
God's purpose was that each human creature be endowed with the ability to produce children in the course of time and thus be able to enjoy married life and to serve its purpose until the filling of the earth with righteous, godlike adult humans had been accomplished.
Okay, well then how do you explain sterile people? Because I once knew a guy who had no testicles. I also knew someone who once dated a guy who had 3 testicles. They called him a tri-baller. There are plenty of women who can't get pregnant for one reason or another, whether it's the hormonal imbalance, PCOS, or something else. So if his purpose was for all humans to be able to produce children, then why can't they? Doesn't say much for his almighty omnipotentness, does it? Also, is anyone else creeped out by the idea of righteous, godlike adult humans? Ugh.
Accordingly, God created man and woman with sex organs for a wonderful purpose in harmony with the divine will.
Why?
Well, if it's so wonderful, Jehovah's Witnesses, then why is everything naturally having to do with sex so shame-ridden and evil to y'all?
These sex organs are therefore not to be treated as playthings, nor are they to be abused, misused, or misapplied.
How to have sex. Step 1, remove clothing, okay? Step 2, apply the penis to the crotchal region of the wife unit.
The proper care of sex organs applies both before marriage and after marriage in order to conduce towards successful, happy marriage.
So what exactly is the proper care of sex organs, pray tell? Well, they never tell us. They allude to it here, but that's it. And for some reason, their use of the word conduce just makes me laugh. I can't help it. I have no idea why, in the midst of this insanity, like all this insanity, that is what cracks me up. But here we are.
When we take a long-range view of matters, the healthy, helpful preparation of a child for future marriage really begins before that child's birth. Yes, in that respect, a heavy responsibility rests on its parents, who should think not only of their child, but also of their grandchild.
Well, That killed the mood.
No one, either the parents or persons, not the parents, should want or has the right to mar a child's opportunity, privilege, and natural right to enter into clean, honorable marriage.
What the hell are they talking about here? Does this make sense to anybody? I think they're kind of hinting that a bastard or an illegitimate child or a kid born to unmarried parents would not be able to enter into honorable marriage. Maybe? And that's the only thing I can think of, honestly. What are they talking about?
We will also have due respect for the right of another person, a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, to get married in a worthy, honorable way.
Okay, but wouldn't this mean that gay people should get to be married too, though? And I really don't think that boys and girls should be getting married. Marriage is only for adults, even if you're a witness.
This means that we would not want to contaminate or corrupt ourselves or others so as to be in an unclean condition when entering in upon this honorable estate of wedlock.
All right, so no mud wrestling before the big event, okay, y'all? Look, let's get real. This clean or unclean condition bullshit is just that. Bullshit. All they're saying here is that if you've had sex, you are dirty, damaged goods. And if you happen to be female, well, you're a double dirty slut and you were worth exactly half of nothing, even if you didn't voluntarily commit fornication.
This calls for us to develop good morals.
The Jehovah's Witnesses wouldn't know actual morality if it bit them in the ass. Morals to them are about nothing except sex. They have no moral issues with lying,
theocratic warfare,
ostracism, bullying, and discrimination,
disfellowshipping,
undue influence,
the blood issue,
coercion and brainwashing,
their entire religion,
or the protection of children.
Australian Royal Commission.
So they might not have sex outside marriage, but that doesn't buy them any points.
Parents or guardians of children should teach them the facts of life.
My mom wouldn't let me watch that show.
This the parents can do in a clean, respectable, upbuilding way.
Okay, so regarding that appendage between your legs. Okay, so I somewhat agree with this actually, though I wonder what this obsession with cleaning has to do with anything. Do they have OCD or just stock in Lysol?
Regardless of whether some medical doctors may think so, the gutter or the slum alley is not the place for boys and girls to learn the facts of life, or rather the abuse, perversion, degradation, and idolatry of sex.
What the hell? Where did this come from? I mean, besides left field. Have you ever in your life had a doctor tell you to go out to the gutter or the slum alley? Where would we find one of those in North Carolina anyway? To learn the facts of life?
Take this prescription down to the slum alley. Third gutter to the left.
For thousands of years, the Creator's own book, the Holy Bible, has been the best book on earth to teach adults and children the basic facts of life.
The Bible does not actually talk about the basic facts of life outside of an impossible misogynist fairy tale of an origin story. It literally explains nothing. There's no advice there for teenagers trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Even worse, the Bible is full of crap like rape, victims of rape being forced to marry their rapists, people getting stoned to death and decapitated for their private sexual behavior, women being treated as property, slavery, including sex slavery of children, deemed perfectly okay by God Almighty. This is not the pure moral enlightenment that we have been told it is. Read the damn book. See for yourself. This is crap. Okay, let's skip ahead a little bit to paragraph 10 of this delightful Watchtower study article.
However, in view of the prevalence of fornication today, it is a question not only of avoiding fornication before marriage, but also of abstaining from adultery after marriage.
Because that is apparently so freaking difficult. It's not difficult not to cheat. It really isn't hard at all.
Today, multitudes of attractive women are willing to sell or offer their bodies for sale for the illegal satisfying of the sexual passions of immoral men.
My, what? I'm a little, like, isn't selling something the same thing as offering something for sale? Then why would you need to... I'm confused. Newsflash, morons. There have always been prostitutes and sex workers, and there always will be. You know why? Because there will always be men who want to get laid without having to care about another human being. Also, it's only immoral if you're married to someone else at the time. Also, Totally not illegal in Nevada or Amsterdam.
Today there are multitudes of boys and men who are likewise willing to sell their bodies and become effeminate.
Oh, Jehovah!
Men kept for unnatural purposes in order to satisfy the lust of men who prefer to lie carnally with males, similar to how a man lies with a woman, which is a detestable thing.
I don't think they really had to say that part about being similar to how a man lies with a woman. And it was already plenty clear in their tone here that they think gay people are detestable. Assholes. Also, if a boy is selling his body, that's technically a crime in most places, and usually he's not the one doing the selling. Same applies to girls. There are criminals in that scenario, but the boy in question here ain't one of them. And another thing, don't they know that not all gay men are effeminate? I know plenty of gay guys who are effeminate, don't get me wrong, but I also know plenty who are not.
There is no love of neighbor expressed in fornication, adultery, or sodomy.
This does not concern the HOA. What do the neighbors have to do with anything? I mean, unless you're getting it on with the neighbor or something, which I would advise against, because number one, you don't shit where you eat. And number two, that would make HOA meetings really awkward.
It is only the letting of burning passion take control with much harm to follow physically, socially, and spiritually, the conscience also being affected.
Translation. You'll get a disease. You'll get disfellowshipped and shunned. Jehovah will smite you and you'll hate yourself. Don't you think it's weird that Jehovah's Witnesses are repeatedly told that they shouldn't be passionate when they have sex? Have you ever had sex without passion? It's not fun. Not fun at all. In fact, it's kind of gross.
With great frankness, God's word warns his people against professional prostitutes.
So I guess amateurs are okay then. How does one become a professional prostitute? Is there like a certificate for that? Do they teach that at the community college?
Or any girl or woman who wants to play the harlot for the time being, designedly playing up to the male victim.
Holy ridiculous misogyny, Batman. The male victim? Okay, I know that sometimes men are victims of domestic violence and sexual misconduct, and I am in no way minimizing those victims or their experiences, but Jesus Christ, people, most of the time, especially in fundamentalist communities like the Jehovah's Witnesses, the men are in charge. The men are considered superior, and therefore the men have the power. The women are far and away most often victimized. God, these people.
Lending oneself to become the victim of an immoral person's wiles is the start of what may end up with death.
So here we have Jehovah's Witness guys being told that they are hapless victims of these shameless hussies, these brazen sluts, these Jezebel harlots who dare to have female bodies and occasionally flash an ankle at the Kingdom Hall. So if the Jehovah's Witness guy gets a hard on and just has to act on it, well, it's not really his fault. He has lent himself to become the victim of an immoral slut. This is just so stupid, it's maddening. These are the very men who are often aggressors themselves. But it's never their fault when it comes down to it. And this is so shitty.
Immorality may be the way to what loose men and women call sophistication, the making of a person worldly wise, but it is not the way to clean, pure wisdom, life-giving wisdom. It is not the way to real living.
Merriam-Webster defines sophistication as the process or result of becoming cultured, knowledgeable, or disillusioned, or the process of becoming more complex, developed, or subtle. It's really got nothing to do with sex. Although, a sophisticated person is likely not a virgin because sex is part of being a grown-ass adult. But the Jehovah's Witnesses don't want their people becoming sophisticated in any sense of the word. They don't want cultured or complex people in there because those people see through bullshit immediately. Fundamentalists, including the Jehovah's Witnesses, are afraid of higher education for a reason. And this right here is it. Sophistication, y'all, is not about being a hoe bag.
Those having company with the immoral may never regain the path of those on the way to everlasting life. Sooner or later, they may land in the place from which they cannot now come back, the place of no return, Sheol, the common grave of mankind, or even worse still, the place of eternal annihilation, Gehenna.
You have sex, you gon' die. And you won't be resurrected during the zombie apocalypse, neither.
This is no matter for the sophisticated to smirk at indifferently, unconcernedly, in this penicillin age.
Wait, what do antibiotics have to do with anything?
Beware of immoral persons, both those outside the organization of God's people and those who might hang on to it or might creep into it and outwardly establish themselves in it.
My. So I think it's interesting that they acknowledge here that there are bad and immoral people within the organization. Yeah, when it suits them to do so.
It's not the organization, it's individuals within the organization. It's immoral persons who have infiltrated.
It's never their fault, and they never take responsibility for the safe haven they've created for predators, chauvinists, and molesters. But I ask you, what is an organization without its members? Non-existent, that's what. Organizations are made of people. The people within literally are the organization. Don't buy this bullshit, please. They go on to belabor the same tired story about the dude going to loiter outside the prostitute's house and how he's a bull going to slaughter and blah, blah, blah.
If you are being tempted by someone immoral, imagine yourself like a bull being led along by a thorn through the nose or by a nose ring subduedly to your own slaughter. Is the picture funny? Do you laugh at yourself?
Look, honey, if this is what you think about when you're turned on, then you don't have to laugh at yourself. Because I'm going to laugh at you enough for all of us. Look, this is absolutely insane. Jehovah's Witnesses are being instructed to imagine being slaughtered every time they get horny. Really. And we wonder why they have issues.
The immoral person's words of inducement, stolen waters themselves are sweet, may for the few minutes be pleasantly fulfilled in sexual satisfaction. But where do you find yourself? In a trap of death like a bird.
You're gonna die if you have sex. This message is being pounded so hard that it becomes ingrained. What happens to the kids raised on this bullshit when they enter into an improved, honorable, clean, holy marriage? They often find themselves completely dysfunctional in the bedroom. You can't just undo years of this kind of brainwashing with an hour-long talk at the Kingdom Hall and a few rings, guys. I think I may have mentioned this before, but my mom told me many times about waking up the first morning after her wedding in a panic, terrified because she was afraid that she had sinned. And she told me another story about a relative who called home on their honeymoon to talk to their parents because they couldn't perform. This is not normal.
Alas, to your great pain, an arrow of death cleaves open your liver.
My.
Comes sorrow, yes, death-dealing pain thereafter, also torment of conscience.
You'll get arrows in your liver. You'll be in excruciating torture and you'll hate yourself forever. Things will never be the same if you have sex. Death, death. I'll spare you the next paragraph, where they stretch like Armstrong, trying to prove that the Bible is medically accurate because sometimes syphilis can affect the liver. They also go on to say that you might be paralyzed and that your future children will all be feeble-minded idiots. Oh, and mentally disabled children are monstrosities. That's a quote. You don't believe me? Okay, here it is.
Then syphilitic children, tainted, having native weakness or inborn incapacity for life. Children stunted physically and mentally, often feeble-minded or even idiotic. Yes, children that are monstrosities. What a way to prepare one's child to approach future marriage with honor.
Wow. You know, I often wondered why my mother acted the way she did about people with disabilities when I was a kid. I remember her musing about a family in our congregation when I was young, wondering what sin the parents had committed that caused their daughter's profound handicaps. She behaved as if being handicapped was contagious, and she took it really hard when she got so sick that she had to go into a wheelchair and then later became bedridden. I mean, okay, anybody would take that hard. I get it. But she took it a little harder than made sense, honestly. And she concluded that she was being punished by Jehovah. And what was the terrible sin that she was being punished for? Not completely shunning me. Only, partially shunning me. Not being nice or loving at all. Just allowing me to exist in her life, even if only as a servant of sorts. This very article is where it all started. My mother was 10 years old when this was written, the same year she got baptized. She never missed a meeting and often pioneered alongside her mother and grandmothers. So, yeah.
Every syphilitic person is a source of possible danger to a person with whom that one comes in close contact, whether that be a wife or a husband or children. One fears to pick up a newspaper or magazine or wipe on a towel wiped on by a syphilitic person or swim in his neighborhood.
Syphilis is transmitted by contact with an open sore or canker, according to the CDC. While this can occur non-sexually, particularly between a mother and child, for example, it's mostly sexually transmitted because the cankers occur in the genital and anal areas and sometimes around the mouth. But you're not going to catch it by reading the paper or drying your hands or going swimming in a neighborhood where a person with syphilis lives. That's ridiculous. Also, I must point out here the utter insanity of all of this fear-mongering for young Jehovah's Witnesses. The only people that they are ever exposed to are other Jehovah's Witness youth. They have no freedom, and they have been indoctrinated from birth that sex is dirty and wrong and disgusting. Their choices of partners are severely limited, and the likelihood of one of them having syphilis is just infinitesimal. I mean, not to say it couldn't happen, but not to the level they're describing here. And they belabor the point here for literally 5 paragraphs.
Teenagers are becoming more and more implicated in diseases of sexual love. Shamelessly, one girl, about 13 or 14 years old, named 80 males with whom she had had sexual connections.
So what they're describing here would be a situation of abuse or statutory rape, actually. And I'm sure there was shame involved. And if there wasn't, the witnesses are adding enough shame to the equation for everybody right here and now. Should a 13 to 14-year-old girl be screwing 80 guys? No. But there are serious legal implications here that are being ignored completely in favor of rampant slut shaming.
According to the report, during the 2 years of 1957 and 1958, the number of children within the age limits of 10 to 14 years having infectious venereal disease rose from 2,443 to 2,793, or 14.3%.
Once again, if kids, and these are kids, these are children, if kids are catching STDs through sexual contact at the age of 10, they are describing child sexual abuse. It's not immorality on the part of the children. Why? Because children cannot consent to sex. And in the US, where this shitty article was written, the age of consent is 18. Moving right along, they start talking about penicillin again.
It is foolish for the immorally inclined to depend upon the power of penicillin to offset the venereal diseases and so think that they can take chances. Despite the penicillin at hand today, those diseases named after the pagan goddess of sexual love, Venus, are on the increase.
I love how they have to link STDs with paganism, as if the ancient Romans had anything to do with any of this. Penicillin does treat syphilis. In fact, all the horrible things that they've referenced in this article come from untreated syphilis. If caught early and properly treated, the antibiotics can prevent the bacteria from spreading to and damaging other organs. The Jehovah's Witnesses don't want you to know that, though.
Even penicillin won't save you, you disgusting perverts. Now praise Jehovah.
70% or more of the sterility in women is because of a husband's communicating gonorrhea to his wife.
Actually, no. The number one cause of infertility in women is polycystic ovary syndrome. But since this article was written a long time ago, I looked up the number one causes of infertility in females in 1960 in the Health Science Journal. And the result was menstrual disorders, of which PCOS is one.
The report is that every year thousands of young innocent wives are thus infected, husbands in many cases unknowingly contributing to wrecking the health and lives of their marriage partners.
What report, Watchtower? Which one are you referencing? There is literally no evidence or source given for any of this.
Wives may thus be reduced to semi-invalidism, inability to walk, and suffering in other ways. Finally, they may feel obligated to call in a surgeon for relief and be castrated by knifing out their God-given generative organs.
Wow. Can you get any more gratuitously graphic, Jehovah's Witnesses? I mean, seriously? Knifing out their generative organs? I mean, it sounds like you're going to drag them down a dark alley and stab them to death behind a dumpster. Jesus.
In this world where fornication and adultery abound as never before, according to the Apostle Paul's advice, it is not the course of unwisdom to have a marriage mate so that one marries in order not to sin.
Wouldn't it do wonders for your self-esteem and self-respect to know that your spouse only married you to keep from sinning? I mean, they married you not because you were the love of their life, because they wanted to spend forever with you, but just because they wanted to fuck and you were the only viable option. If you haven't noticed, I've been skipping ahead a lot here because this article is just endless. It's just infinite bullshit. So now they've decided to rewrite Proverbs chapter 5 verses 15 through 23 to make sure we understand exactly what they think is meant by cisterns and tricklings and wells and shit.
Drink water out of your own cistern and tricklings out of the midst of your own well, that is, out of your legal marriage mate, as a wellspring of sexual happiness and pleasure.
gross. Did they put the tricklings in a glass or like a mug or... Hold on a second. I thought they didn't allow oral sex.
Should your springs of sexual satisfaction be scattered out of doors where the harlots lie in wait?
That's right, brothers. Those sluts are just waiting out there to jump your fat polyester suit-wearing, briefcase-carrying, pocket-protected bones.
Your streams of water for sexual refreshment in the public squares themselves where prostitutes offer themselves for a price.
Why are they so obsessed with prostitution?
Let them prove to be for you alone with your marriage mate and not for strangers with you.
So... no swinging then?
Let your water source, your source of sexual gratification, prove to be blessed, not cursed by God.
Why is God cursing all the water sources? Or is he cursing all the women? I'm lost.
And rejoice with the wife of your youth, a lovable hind and a charming mountain goat. Let her own breasts, not those of immoral women, intoxicate you at all times. With her love may you be in ecstasy constantly.
But not really. Ecstasy is frowned upon when you're a Jehovah's Witness, even with your duly appointed spouse. Next.
A married Christian is obligated to be satisfied with his one wife.
Well, that's just what I always wanted from my other half, my soulmate, my life partner. Obligation.
If a dedicated Christian wants to have a woman, he should marry her honorably.
Excuse me? Have a woman? Is that like having a drink? Or having a sandwich? Because that's kind of how they treat their women. And the message to all the girls here is very clear. Once you've been had, you are worthless, used up, a waste of oxygen. Nobody's ever going to want to marry you if the safety seal has been broken on the old vajayjay. And if they don't want to marry you, well, you know what that means. You're a temptress, destined to be one of those cautionary tales. Gag.
A married Christian should not want to supplement his wife by other women inside the Christian congregation or outside it, and thereby have cisterns, wells, springs, or water streams from which to draw sexual pleasure out of doors, outside his own home, and out in the public squares.
Now we're talking about wife supplements? Geez, what's next? Has anyone else noticed how their language throughout this atrocity of an article is so slanted toward the male? Women are the temptresses. Women are the immoral traps. Women are the disease carriers, unless they're, helpless victims of husbands who've been screwing around with other disgusting females.
An unfaithful marriage mate may try to do this in secret or under darkness, but let such person remember that the ways of a dedicated Christian are in front of the eyes of Jehovah, and that Jehovah is contemplating all his tracks. Nothing escapes Jehovah as judge.
Oh dear. Jehovah is watching every move you make, every grope, every feel, even if you do it at night. Creep. Because these people are actually stupid enough, apparently, to think that if they do something in the dark, nobody's gonna find out.
He warns us that sneak errors of any Christian will catch up with him as a wicked person. He will realize it when maybe he finds that he has a shameful disease burned into his body, or his reproductive powers are killed, or his wife becomes sterile or gives birth to a stillborn child, or a blinded child, or a deformed or diseased child.
Wow. That escalated quickly. What's a sneak error? It's almost an oxymoron. A carefully premeditated mistake. Honestly, I think that a philanderer would be happy to have his reproductive powers killed. But if he's shooting blanks, then where did the stillborn, blind, deformed alien baby come from?
He may painfully be brought to realize concerning the immoral woman with whom he became one flesh that the after effect from her is as bitter as wormwood. It is as sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet are descending to death. Her very steps take hold on Sheol itself.
Oh yeah, it's totally that whore's fault. Certainly not his. No, he's just guilty of a sneak error. She's the filthy, diseased, immoral, disgusting one. Obviously.
Jehovah brings him to judgment before his earthly congregation, the Christian assembly. As a disgrace to God and his congregation, he is disfellowshipped, cast out of the congregation in dishonor, to where the dead world is.
The dead world where people are actually allowed to enjoy their lives.
Knowing whom Jehovah God denounces, do we want to suffer his denunciation by falling into the deep pit of immorality opened up for us by the honey-flowing mouth of an immoral person, woman, or man? Do we want to be denounced out of Jehovah's clean, approved organization?
Why, it's a fate worse than death.
I mean, seriously, it is. If you've been raised in and you don't even know anyone on the outside, suddenly everybody that you've ever known treats you like you're dog shit on their shoe. Nobody wants to be disfellowshipped, and all Jehovah's Witnesses want approval more than a raging addict wants another hit. But notice, they're still falling into immorality, being enticed by a honey-flowing mouth, whatever that is. They're still not treating this as any kind of choice, which it is. Anyway, the next paragraph is all about how the witnesses' bodies are Christ's member. There's an interesting thought. And then the next paragraph gives us this gem.
So, if a member of Christ's spiritual body commits immorality with one of the opposite sex, man or woman, that one is trying to take a member of Christ's body and make it one flesh with the immoral person in fornication or adultery.
So, if you have sex, you're making Jesus? You asshole! You're raping Jesus? What is wrong with you? How is this bizarre convolution of reason even possible?
Do you think that Christ Jesus will consent to being made one with a harlot or an adulteress?
My.
Not for a moment. One cannot be one flesh with a morally unclean person, and at the same time one spirit with the Lord Jesus Christ. By sexually making oneself one flesh with the morally filthy, one is sinning against one's own flesh.
But what if we're actually talking about two young Jehovah's Witness teens who have fallen in love? Okay, both of these people are born-in Jehovah's Witness virgins, and in the course of their Christian courtship, they find a few minutes to themselves and manage to do the deed. How do you think this message falls for them? Well, the boy is probably seeing himself as having consorted with a morally unclean person, and his little Jehovah's Witness girlfriend is now a harlot, a morally filthy person, and all because she fell in love with the boy carrying the microphones at the Thursday night meeting or whatever, who was probably the one pushing for the encounter in the first place. No pun intended. My experience as a Jehovah's Witness teenager years ago, I'll give them that, tells me that Jehovah's Witness boys can be very aggressive indeed. Did I mention also that this article's really fucking long? Yeah. Skipping ahead a little further.
Think of making your flesh belonging to the New World Society of Jehovah's Witnesses, one flesh with an immoral person.
Hang on, did they just say that Jehovah's Witnesses belong to the New World Society of Jehovah's Witnesses? Like, literally their flesh is the property of Watchtower? That's just nuts.
Does the New World Society consent to your making it one flesh or one unit with the fornicator or adulterous person?
Y'all, witnesses don't know anything about consent. Not one single iota. Also, it is truly batshit crazy to imagine that a person obeying their biological drive is also forcing a publishing company and all its associates to likewise go for a roll in the hay. I mean, just imagine. Or better yet, don't. Ew.
Not for a moment. If you have no respect for it and its good name, God's Spirit will not let it have any respect for you in your immorality. It cannot count you one of it, for you bring reproach on it and on the God whose name it bears, and thus you are a stumbling block to others.
Okay, first of all, grammar. And second, Watchtower doesn't even pretend to respect anyone either. But this gets better. Let's read on.
This is something for missionary girls to think of seriously in their foreign assignments, when they are ardently pursued by smoothly operating native boys or men who put on a front of interest in the Bible message borne by the missionary girl and then try them out with improper suggestive advances to soften them up.
Wow. It's misogyny and colonialism and maybe even some racism all rolled into one. I didn't actually think this was possible, but here we are. Look out, missionary girls, because, you know, you're never going to be women. You'll always just be girls, even when you're 55. Sorry about it. Men you meet in the field are just trying to get in your pantyhose.
This is something to think about for dedicated Christian young people who are coming into marriageable years, who may be dreaming of happy, successful marriage under God's blessing either before or after the Battle of Armageddon. This is something for all dedicated members of the New World Society to think about in this degraded, immoral world of temptation, in which we are under obligation to keep moral integrity to God. Do not try to learn the hard way.
You know, I find it hard to believe that anyone would really go out of their way to try to learn something the hard way on purpose. I think that might just be something that happens because some people are hard-headed, and sometimes we need to learn things in our own way, in our own time. It's especially difficult to take the advice of moth-eaten old men in cheap suits who've never experienced anything like a real life, or else they're so power-hungry and attention-starved that they enjoy ruining other people's lives for fun. Who knows? I just know that when I was a young woman, I could not contain my eye rolls when the musty octogenarian on the podium at the Kingdom Hall tried to tell me what it was like to be a young woman, and what I was thinking and what I should be thinking. Well, that's it for this episode, y'all. This has been a really really long one. That's what she said. Tune in next time when we'll talk about how the organization should view chasteness and other exciting and scintillating topics brought to you by the pre-1970 Jehovah's Witnesses. I can hardly wait. Until then, I'm Sister Fister, and this is Crazy.